Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Babel One and United, which are episodes 12 and 13 of Star Trek Enterprise Season 4. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my user polls. The episode to win my latest user poll is this two-parter, Babel One and United. Now, first of all, I have to talk about my decision to call this a two-parter, which is a very subjective thing. I just decided to do this for my channel because sometimes when they're two-parters, I review them as one episode because I think they are effectively one episode. This one's a little tricky, though, because it actually forms a three-parter with the episode The R&R, but I had already actually did a review for the R&R, and I decided then when I reviewed the R&R to review it on its own without including these two episodes, but I also made the decision that when I reviewed these episodes I would review them together because I feel like these two episodes kind of blend together, like they tell the same exact story over the course of 2 hours. It was just too much to fit into one episode, where the R&R I can really pinpoint as its own separate episode, even though it does continue and conclude the story of these two episodes. It's almost like an epilogue, really, and it really feels like its own individual episode. And I already covered that episode and how at first I didn't like it because it did feel so different and removed from this two-parter. But when I reviewed it on its own or watched it out of context, I actually appreciated it a lot more because it does change drastically in tone from these two episodes. So I know it's a very subjective thing. Other people covering these episodes might cover it differently. Maybe they'll just do one at a time, or maybe they'll bunch them all together as a three-parter, but this is just what I decided to do, and I'm just sticking by it. It's just what I wanted to do. Made sense for me. Anyway, so Babel One and United are the episodes in which the Romulans send a drone ship that can disguise itself as other ships in order to disrupt the peace process as a conference is about to take place on Babel between the Andorians and the Tellarites, and Enterprise was transporting the Tellarites to this conference when all hell broke loose, and Archer must struggle to prevent a war from breaking out between the Andorians and Tellarites, and eventually he does convince and lead them to make a truce in order to defeat this Romulan drone ship. So, this is a good episode. I think it's one of the strengths of Season 4, because I talked about Season 4 before, about how it's basically, I call it the fanboy season of Star Trek. Not just Enterprise, but of Star Trek. Like, this is why I think it's one of the better seasons, and not quite the best, although I know a lot of people disagree with me, but I actually prefer Season 3 over Season 4, but I think it is one of the better seasons of Enterprise. And it's because that it is kind of the producers or the studios kind of held back and let the fanboys do their thing and make tons of original series reference, but this is why Season 4 of Enterprise actually feels most like it belongs in the Star Trek universe. It feels most like it is a prequel to the original Star Trek series because, and this is what Brennan Braga, who was the showrunner for the first 2.5 seasons, officially 3 seasons, but this is what he said. He said that Manny Coto, who was the showrunner for Season 4, understood Star Trek as a fan, and that what he did with the show in Season 4 should have been what the show was all along, which I could not possibly agree with more. This is the one thing I do agree totally with Brennan Braga about, is that he shouldn't have been the showrunner. Manny Coto should have been the showrunner from the start. Anyway, Season 4 is an all amazing, though. There's a lot of episodes that I think are not particularly good, which I'm sure I covered before or will cover more in the future. However, this one I think is a prime example of them using this format of fanboying out, shall I say, and trying to connect it most to the original series where it really, really works. Because this is obviously the title of the first part, Babel One, is obviously a reference to the classic original series episode Journey to Babel, in which the species of the Andorians and the Tellarites were first introduced. And for a longest time, and I want to say pretty much up till Enterprise, neither of these species were really seen in Star Trek since that episode. I mean, except that you saw a couple of Andorians in the background throughout the rest of the original series, and they were name dropped a lot in TNG DS9 Voyager. I think we saw like Lal in the episode The Offspring. Data's daughter was trying to choose an appearance. She briefly had a holographic image of an Andorian male. I think that's the only time we actually saw Andorians on Next Generation, but they were referenced that they still exist. Tellarites are also referenced that they still exist, but I think we might have seen a Tellarite in the background in the original series too. But basically, Journey to Babel was the only episode where they really had any significance or any true appearance before Enterprise. And of course, Enterprise came along and the Andorians became a regular thing. Strand became a recurring character. And in season 2, they introduced Tellarites in the episode about the Tellarite bounty hunter. And I think we might have seen them once or twice before this, but this is the first real episode when we really delve into the Tellarites, really. But of course, the Andorians have been established since season 1 of Enterprise, but mostly it's been an Enterprise thing. But this episode really does take its inspiration from Journey to Babel, because those species hadn't really been touched on that much, well, except for the Andorians. But the Andorians, even before Enterprise, hadn't been touched on. And so this episode was about bringing them together and showing how this is basically showing the origins of the Federation, which is where I think the second part of this two-parter takes the title takes its inspiration from United Federation of Planets, because this is like the origins of that sort of happening of these species coming together. Because as we've seen in earlier seasons of Enterprise, the Andorians and the Vulcans were at war and did not get along at all. But then earlier this season we saw that sort of the truce between them starting to get better. But here it deals with the conflict between the Tellarites and the Andorians head on. And of course it also sprinkles in the Romulans in a very, very good way, which I do believe every time I watch this episode was setting up for a Romulan War season storyline in season 5, which has been confirmed they were planning on doing a Romulan War storyline in season 5, which makes me really sad, depressed, or whatever that the Enterprise got canceled. It got canceled when it was hit its stride, when it was at its best. And so it's one of the main regrets in life that they actually canceled Enterprise at this point in time, which it had more to do with politics and the direction and finances and the direction that UPN wanted to go in, more than this franchise fatigue BS argument, which I think that argument is total BS. I don't back it. I don't buy it at all. People didn't have franchise fatigue. The showrunners had franchise fatigue, at least in the first 2 seasons, and that is what alienated the audience's bad shows, not too much Star Trek. The whole argument of franchise fatigue, I think, is BS. But anyway, interestingly enough, and it was announced that Enterprise was being canceled right after Babel One had aired. So United was the first episode to air after it had been announced that the season would be the last. Now, they did allow Of course, these two episodes had already been filmed and finished, whatever, but they did allow Enterprise to conclude. Like, they didn't stop production immediately. They allowed them to conclude its production, which is why they were able to cobble together a finale to run up the end of the show, because they knew when they were writing the episode it would be the last show of Enterprise. Now, I've already covered that episode, which I think gets way more hate than it deserves. It's not a good episode by any means, but nowhere near as bad as everyone else makes it out to be, in my humble opinion. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about that either. I'm here to talk about Babel One and United. And yes, you can tell in this episode, in this two-parter, that they're preambling a Romulan War storyline that I'm very disappointed didn't get made, because they do a really good job of preambling, and it kind of makes sense. Now, I talked about when I did a review of the episode Balance of Terror from the original series that it's impossible to square exactly the established canon with the Romulan War and how that fits in. So had they did in the Romulan War, I'm sure the Canon Hawks would have been upset with it, because there's no way because when that episode was being created and when the original series was made, they didn't know this would be a long-running franchise that would run over 60, 70 years. They didn't know that. They thought they were going to get canceled next week. So they weren't planning ahead. So the canon that was established in the episode of Balance of Terror is impossible to maintain, because it does not actually fit with what they did with Star Trek in the future. Therefore, I think it should be disregarded. And I know a lot of people would have bitched and moaned about, they're keeping over the canon of Balance of Terror, but I don't think they should. I think they should completely, utterly disregard that canon, because, as I said, like, it doesn't fit into what Star Trek became after that. And the writers of that episode had no idea what Star Trek was going to become. They weren't doing world building. They were just writing one particular episode of a 60s show that they thought was going to get canceled next week. So I don't think they should hold any sort of... And it does a little bit, because it stays true to some of that canon there, because some of the things established was that the humans had never seen a Romulan before the episode Balance of Terror in person or on the view screen, as it may be. And so far, up to this episode, Enterprise maintained that, because they knew it was the Romulans. They heard of the name of the Romulans, but they didn't actually see what a Romulan looked like. They saw their ships in the previous episode, Minefield, but they didn't actually see them. So that's maintained. However, if they did a war storyline in Season 5, hypothetically speaking, because Season 5 never happened, but had it happened, and they showed that the human saw a Romulan, I would not be bothered by that personally. But they did try to maintain that aspect of it. But the whole other aspects, in fact, I think they don't actually break canon in this episode. But I wouldn't mind if they did, because I think that, as I said, I think that canon's impossible to maintain. Although I think they do break canon in the fact that in that episode it was mentioned that the Earth fought Romulus before they had photonic weapons, and when they had nuclear weapons, and they didn't have view screen communications, which we already know Enterprise has this stuff. So that's broken. It should be broken, because that's stupid. You don't want to try to maintain that, because that makes no sense. Yeah, and also the Vulcans had no idea that the Romulans are offshoots, so that's maintained. So basically, the Romulans are mostly in the shadows in the background. They were hinted at also in the episode Kirshara as being behind the uprising in Vulcan. They're trying to take that over, but when that failed. And I like the way the Romulans are used in this episode as being like this behind. It reminds me of the way the Dominion were used in Deep Space Nine before the war broke out, of being this like behind the shadow trying to just start wars amongst the other races to destabilize the region to make it easier for them, because those races getting together and becoming an alliance is the last thing we want. In fact, this is primarily the role that the Romulans will play in the Next Generation, as the Klingon Federation alliance is like an alliance between these two huge empires, or two huge powerful organizations that present a huge threat to the Romulan Empire, that these two huge superpowers are allied with each other. So they're constantly trying to constantly trying to undermine that alliance throughout Next Generation. So the role that they played here makes a lot of sense, that they would try to prevent the Federation from ever being formed, basically, is what they're doing, because they don't want the Andorians and the Tellarites to make peace and ally. They don't want the humans to ally. They want there to be chaos amongst all the different species, and it does start to work. And so having the concept of this like drone ship that uses holographic emitters to pretend to be like other ships, so they can like attack the Andorians and have the ship look like a Tellarite ship, so the Andorians think the Tellarites attack them and attack the Tellarites, and have it look like an Andorian ship, and then attack some random freighter and have it look like Enterprise and make it look like the humans are attacking people. Like, that was a very interesting concept, and it's so in character and so in line with the kind of tactics that the Romulans would use. And of course we also do see the Romulans with their own scenes on Romulus, which is true to how it appears in Next Generation. They use the same makeup, which they'll change in newer track for no good reason, in my opinion. But anyway, like, don't even talk to me about those Kelvinverse movies where they have these fucking tattoos on their head. Like, who the hell are those people? Anyway, I like they keep the Next Generation makeup. I think they should have kept it up until Newer Trek, but whatever. And they, the planet of the Romulus, they use the same kind of matte painting, although CGI is used in this two-parter, but it looks pretty much, just like the matte paintings used to look back in TNG. And you had the Romulan senator, and they all look alike. You even get to see Remans in this episode, which is, I believe, the first time we actually saw Remans outside of Nemesis when they were first introduced, and they'll later appear. I don't think we saw any Picard, but I know we did see some in Lower Decks, or at least they were name dropped in Lower Decks. Remans are the worst. Anyway. So that was sort of building up that continuity, even though I do feel like Nemesis kind of just made them up and threw them in at the last second, what I thought was a bit silly, but whatever. It's canon now, and so they were maintaining that by showing the Remans all the way to the back here. So I like that. That was cool. And the actor who played the lead Romulan guy, I didn't bring up his name, but I've seen it. I always call him the Arnold Schwarzenegger lookalike, because he kind of looks and sounds like a bit like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Fun fact, he actually appeared in the Terminator with Arnold Schwarzenegger as one of the punks, along with Bill Paxton, that Arnold Schwarzenegger killed and stole their clothes, or the Terminator, I should say, killed and stole their clothes at the start of the movie. Anyway, he appeared in many Star Trek before. Most notably, he played Clag, the Klingon second officer that Riker befriended in the episode of Matter of Honor. He played one of those, like, in that, what episode was it? It was called, something about Prophet. No, was it the Rules of Acquisition? I think it was Rules of Acquisition. Season 2 Deep Space Nine episode where Quark and Pell go to the Gamma Quadrant to start negotiations with the species, and they're like these really, like, they have like painted face like red and orange, and they're like beat the shit out of people that they do business with, and they're very intimidating. And the guy so the actor played that guy in that episode where he smashed the thing It's like, I'm very serious about profit. Now, people always misquote them as being a part of the Dominion, but they weren't a part of the Dominion. They introduced Quark to the Karma, who were a part of the Dominion, but regardless. Anyway, so yeah, and I think he's been in a couple other episodes as well, and also he was in the X-Files. He played this recurring villain, this like clone evil bad guy who kept appearing. So I've seen this actor a lot. It was actually good to see him as a Romulan. I think he does a really good villain, I will say, and he did a really good job as this menacing Romulan who would just be willing to kill Reed and Tucker to get what he wants. And so yeah, I really like that aspect. And so we also have the storyline of Reed and Tucker going to the ship, and they're getting trapped there, and then they're trying to find a way out. And as I said, the Raman, who's actually in a remote location. That was an interesting twist. We found out at the end of the first part that there were no one. We kept seeing scenes of these Romulans talking about, oh, they're on the ship, blah blah blah. And so the whole time you're assuming that they're on the ship with Reed and Tucker, but at the end they reveal they're actually back on Romulus, controlling the ship remotely, which I thought was a really awesome reveal. And I love the parts in season 2 where Reed and Reed and Tucker were starting to disable the ship, and the Romulans of course didn't want that, so they like trapped them and threatened to kill them unless they re-engaged the ship. And Reed re-engaged it and fixed it just like they wanted. So it's like, oh, we have no further use for the humans, kill them. I don't know why he would talk like a Frankie, but anyway. And Tucker's like, why'd you do that? They're just gonna kill us now. But Reed's like, no, I got a plan. But it's funny because Reed indicated to Tucker that they're listening, so I can't tell you what the plan is. But then he essentially does. Like, the Romulans don't get it. He's like, did you ever read the manual on these things? And he points to, like, the spot where his phaser should have been, but it was gone. And it's like, especially the part about overloading. I mean, to me, that made it too obvious. All you had to do is, did you ever read the manual on these things, and point to the spot where his phaser was missing. And that should have been enough for Tucker to get what he was talking about without the Romulans being clued in. And but him going, oh, about the part about overloading it, like, that should have made it obvious the Romulans what was going on, especially the way that Tucker and Reed were talking. They were still acting like they were oblivious to the fact of what Reed was doing when it's fucking obvious when he said the overloading thing. But whatever. And it's a bit too on the nose, if you ask me. But anyway, I still love that scene. I thought that was a cool scene, that the whole like struggle for, the conflict between Reed and Tucker and the Romulans. The intimate conversations Reed and Tucker had about Tucker's feelings for T'Pol, I could do without. But it is setting up for a storyline that will be in the next couple episodes. But yeah, I still overall thought that their whole being trapped there was a really great, exciting scene. Now, moving over to Enterprise with the Tellarites, I think the aspect of the Tellarites introduced in this episode that they argue a lot, and when they come on board, Archer has to like argue and insult them, and because it's seen as it's part of their culture, like they'll get offended if you don't insult them. I feel like that was made up for this episode. I mean, the Tellarites had always been portrayed as kind of cantankerous and argumentative, but the fact that like they want to be insulted and you have to insult them in order to respect their culture, I think that's going too far, and I think that was made up for this episode. So I was a bit iffy on that whole thing, but whatever. I mean, it is kind of humorous at the start of the episode. But then, of course, we get into the Andorians with Shran. Of course, Shran's the only Andorian in existence, but don't get me wrong. I love seeing Jeffrey Combs, so if they all constantly run into Shran, that's fine by me, because more Jeffrey Combs, the better. But So then we get in the storyline where he thinks the Tellarites attacked them, and he's getting all pissed off, and Archer has to sort of try to diffuse the situation, and then eventually... one of the things that I love about this episode is when they have a senior staff meeting, it's between Archer, T'Pol, and Mayweather. I think this is the only time, maybe not the only time, there might have been other times in the press, but Mayweather's usually underused and neglected, which I found season 4 was trying to correct. It didn't quite get there because there wasn't that much it can do in one season. I feel like if there was a season 5, they would have done more to make Mayweather an actual character rather than just a background background person just sitting there saying all these stories with no sort of two-dimensional, I think is the word I'm looking for. But I loved how he was the one sitting in the senior staff meeting with Archer and T'Pol, because, well, Reed and Tucker, of course, weren't there. They were, on the other ship, but they could have just had it just be Archer and T'Pol. But I love how they threw Mayweather, or they could have had just Phlox, which they do just sometimes. We really wouldn't make any sense because this isn't a medical situation. So I love how they had Mayweather there. But anyway, they come up with a plan. They discover about the Romulan ship, and they come up with a plan to, reveal to the Andorians that what's really going on, that the Romulans that are manipulating it. But right before they could tell the Andorians and Tellarites, they already start fighting amongst each other, and Shran and his Andorian wife try to take the Tellarites captive, and Archer's manages to talk them down, but in doing so, with the Tellarite aid, shoots and kills Shran's wife. And so Shran is just, in the next episode, she doesn't die immediately, so in the next episode, Shran agrees to this truce that will allow where they'll team up to make this armada to take down the stealth ship. But in the meantime, Shran's wife dies from her injuries, and so Shran challenges the aide to a fight to the death, and if he refuses to fight, he'll pull the Andorians from the Alliance. But of course, if Shran kills the Tellarite, then the Tellarites will pull from the Alliance, and so they're kind of placed in an impossible situation. And so Archer's solution to this is to fight Shran himself, because if he dies, then the Federation, the Starfleet won't pull from the Alliance, so they'll still be fine. But of course, everyone doesn't want Archer to die, so they come up with another plan. Again, good use of Mayweather and Hoshi, two of the minor use characters, they're the ones who come up with the plan for Archer to get out of this situation, because they both are studying the bylaws of this Andorian ritual, and is in fact Mayweather who takes knowledge from what happened to his father when he was visiting an alien planet, and sort of looks at the rules and comes up with a plan to get out of this situation, which frankly this plan seems a bit dumb. That Archer simply cuts off one of Shran's antennas, and so that satisfies the honor or whatever without actually killing him. Because if Archer were to kill him, then he's where the Andorians would withdraw their support. I gotta be honest, I think I didn't really care for this whole storyline that much. I think it was kind of a way to fill out the episode, and it was kind of a way to, we need more tension, we need more excitement, let's have a fight to the death between Shran and Archer. But it felt really contrived to me, really forced. Once Archer substituted himself for the Tellarite, and of course there's always there would be that convenient rule that would allow Archer to substitute himself for the Tellarite. But why would Shran continue? I know they say he continues for the officialness of it, so officially he'll get revenge for his wife's death, but I don't know. It all seems really far-fetched and contrived, and all these things. Let's make this rule real, and let's make this real, just so they could have a fight between Archer and Shran, which I don't know. I thought was a bit of a bit flimsy, if you ask me. So that was probably my least favorite part of this two-parter. But we do see that, Archer wins the fight, and they'll, team up, and they're able to, and they even have Vulcans, and they're helping them, and they're all able to defeat the stealth ship and rescue Reed and Tucker. Now, of course, the stealth ship does get away, which is what we deal with in the third episode, which I already covered. But however, that episode, as I said, I think goes in a different direction. It has a totally different tone and feel. So I feel like this is the clear conclusion to this two-parter, that they defeated the stealth ship and rescued Reed and Tucker, and made truce. And you get the scene with Andorian and the Tellurite shaking hands, and so it's like the beginnings of the Federation, beginning of the United Federation of Planets, and so that was really exciting, and so I really enjoyed that. And you get the big reveal, dun dun dun, that the pilot of the stealth ship was a Andorian, but again, that's something that would be covered in the third episode. So anyway, my rating for Babel One and United out of 10, I think I'm going to give this an 8. Extremely good. I think I've given it a 9 before, and I was really, really close to giving it a 9. But the more I think about it, the more I think, like, they're good episodes, but they're not outstanding great, because, as I said, the whole fight between Shran and Archer I think was unnecessary and kind of contrived and just there to fill up time. And while it's really cool seeing the origins of the Andorians and Tellurites team up, I don't think it's like amazing, best thing ever kind of cool. So yeah, so it's a high 8, but I'm gonna give this an 8. Extremely good. So that is it for my review of Babel One and United. Thanks so much for watching. I shall be back with more Star Trek reviews, and also covering Star Trek Lower Decks every week, as well as many other shows such as Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Better Call Saul, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.